Hi, my name is Daniel Sadi, and I'm a facilitator and decision analyst here at Decision Lens. And today I'd like to talk to you about meeting facilitation and the collaborative process and how you can use certain tools and techniques to help keep a group oriented towards the meeting objective and the purposes you've set for decision making in the process. So I'd like to go through a couple of tools today, including meeting objective, agenda, ground rules, consensus, a parking lot, tracking and prioritizing of conversations, mirroring, and other methods to manage different personalities and dynamics of participants in the decision process. It's important to recognize that when you're going to have a group go through a collaborative process, that they need expectations that are set very clearly, and that people are consistently aligned to those expectations as they go through the process. Your role as the meeting facilitator is to foster a collaborative environment, to make sure that people are given the chance to share information when they have relevant contextual information to share, and that the group doesn't get off track as they go through the decision-making process. So your job is really to make sure that you keep people oriented around the decision and the expectations that have been set. So the first tool that is a very effective way of helping with the facilitation process is just to set a clear meeting objective that defines the purpose of the meeting and then states in clear and meaningful terms what people have set out to accomplish in that meeting, and then validate understanding and consensus with the team that that objective makes sense and that that's what they're trying to accomplish. Something that's important in facilitation is to be flexible. These processes are not that linear and easy to keep on track, and so it's important that if the process needs to shift, that you make the group aware that the process is going to shift, and you set the expectation with them that you may need to recalibrate what your objective is. So it's important to state the objective in the beginning of the process, engage people to make sure that that objective makes sense, and then to revisit that objective as you're going through the decision-making process to ensure that people are still aligned to what they're trying to accomplish. And in the end, to be able to be flexible if it turns out that the original objective of the meeting needs a change over time, but it's important to make the group aware of this as you go through. The next big tool that can be used before you start a meeting is an agenda. It's very effective for letting the decision makers in the meeting process know what steps they're going to be going through and tracking progress against those steps as they go. You want to often keep the team up with the agenda, so you want to make sure that if they're falling behind, that you let them know that the meeting process is behind, and then ask them how they want to address that. Do they want to extend the length of the meeting, or do they want to move on to a new topic? So the starting of the meeting and the way that you stage out the decision process, it's very important to lay out the milestones that you're trying to accomplish and to track how well you're doing against those. There's a number of tools that can actually be used to help the collaborative process stay on track. When you get a group of people together, especially if they don't know each other, it's difficult for them to figure out how they norm to one another's communication patterns. And so in a meeting, you want to lay out some tools that the group can agree to are effective ways for them to communicate with one another so that people don't get offended. A facilitator is not there to tell people to be quiet. A facilitator is not there to tell people that it is time to move on. A facilitator is there to remind people that they have a process that they've agreed to and to ensure that they stay on track and that people's opinions and considerations are included in the collaborative process. So one of the main tools that I like to use is ground rules, and I like to often start with an initial set of ground rules, offer them to the group, let the group determine whether those ground rules are going to make sense for how they're going to collaborate, and then let them change the ground rules if they need to in the meeting process. One of my favorite ground rules is no stories. No stories is, the idea is, certain personalities in a meeting room, particularly type A personalities, often like to command the voice space, the sound space that's going on in the room. And so it's important that in a nice way, you remind those type A's before the meeting process starts that we're not here to hear how you got from childhood to this meeting room. We're here to get the relevant 2 or 3 pieces of information from you and then let the collaborative process continue. So it's important that people don't take up the breathing space in the room and prevent people from collaborating. And the facilitator's role is not to be a policeman, but to remind people that they've set a ground rule and validating to them whether or not, let them validate among one another whether or not they're meeting those ground rules. Another good ground rule is conversational courtesy. And this is a very important ground rule if you're trying to get something done in a tight time schedule. When people carry on side conversations during a meeting process, you have to think about the compounded loss of time that can occur with that. If somebody is speaking and 2 other folks are carrying on a side conversation and miss the point of that person, and then they need to be stopped and they need to be re-engaged by the whole group and told that context again because they weren't able to pay attention, and others might not have been able to pay attention because they were distracted by the side conversation, you can lose 15 compounded minutes of time if you think about the 1 minute you've lost for the 15 participants who might be in a meeting. So it is a massive time sink to have these side conversations. You want to avoid it. We also have a justification rule which says if you're going to make a statement, we want you to try and explain why. It's not good enough to say, I believe this because I think so. Well, I think so doesn't inform other people in the meeting process about the logic behind the rationale that's driving your statement. It's important that people are asked, please try and explain why. And it's okay to say, I don't know. I don't know. I'm throwing out. Learning is part of the meeting process, and you want people to be able to share what they know and also offer up when they don't know about something so that they can become more informed. Because effective decisions are made through effective communication and understanding of one another's positions in the process. It's important that when you have breaks in these meetings, a lot of times organizations get in this pattern of people go out and they say they're going to be back in 5 minutes, they're back in 12 or 15 minutes. And if we talk about the 1 minute lost from the conversational courtesy issue, you're talking 7 minutes times 15 people. You've just lost 2 hours of employees' time, an hour and a half of employees' time because people didn't return on time. So it's important that they think about that. So as you see, and then we want to offer others. Does anyone else want ground rules? Or does anyone want to remove one of the ground rules that we propose? These are ones that we found work. But in the end, what we want to make sure is that people have tools to help them understand how they're supposed to communicate during a collaborative process. One thing that's very important before I move on, the facilitator, again, is not there to police the group on these ground rules. The facilitator should never tell somebody, shut up or be quiet. They've got to say, I want you to recognize that you set some ground rules before the meeting process, and I've heard some people carry on side conversations. Is it okay? Is it not disrupting anyone? And would you like to let it continue? It's your meeting. You've got to remind the group that this is their meeting process, it's their expectations that they've set, and you're there to help them understand how to deliver against those expectations.